Welcome to the Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Emma Quinn. I am an interior designer, life coach, author and speaker, and I am on a mission to empower you to overcome anxiety and live your best life. Join me each week where I'll be sharing personal stories, tips and tricks to help you achieve this. Thank you so much for joining me. Now let's get started. Hello everyone and welcome to the Life by Design podcast. I hope you are having a great week, whatever you are getting up to. So thank you for joining me and I hope you enjoyed my last episode. So for this week's episode, I thought it would be interesting to talk about something that I am really passionate about, and that is the magic of decluttering. So this is something that I have been really passionate about probably for the last 7 to 8 years or so. And it's not just about decluttering, it's really kind of about the idea of minimalism as a whole. So I have a whole chapter in my book about this and how it kind of helped me overcome anxiety and achieve some of my biggest goals. So I just sort of thought, why not share a bit about this on the podcast, and hopefully it will inspire you to embrace minimalism or even just to have a good clear out and see how that affects your mood and kind of all the other benefits that come along with it. So a couple of little stats here for you is about, the impact that this can have. It's not just me saying that it's great to do. So a study from UCLA's Center on Everyday Lives and Families found that cluttered homes lead to increased cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, and this is especially in women. So it's no surprise that women, and I think especially mums as well, can find it really stressful if your home is a mess, and why it can feel so therapeutic to have a really good declutter and clear out. Decluttering can increase productivity by up to 40% according to Forbes. 78% of people in a happiness study by Rubbermaid said decluttering made them feel happier and more in control, which is not surprising to me. And there is just tons more research on this to show how it helps you sleep better, to make healthier food choices, and to achieve your goals, among many other benefits. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about how I sort of got into minimalism and decluttering in a big way. So I'm going to take you back to, what year would it have been? Well, I said 7 to 8 years, so whatever that was, maybe like 2017, maybe something around then. I know it was whenever I was in San Francisco anyway. And while I was there, I suppose I kind of had an on-off relationship with decluttering. I would maybe do it a few times a year, but then I would slip back into old habits because I was kind of this shopaholic. I loved nothing more than shopping, and I always remember that every time I would go back to Ireland. Now, if you're an Irish immigrant, you will probably relate to this, but the first thing I wanted to do as soon as I got off that plane was to go to Penny's, or Primark as it's known in the north. And just because we didn't have anything like that over there, I know maybe now there are some Pennies, I think there's a big one in Boston maybe, but where I was, there wasn't anything like this, and it was just that thrill of getting, this bargain, even if you didn't need anything. I feel like it's just such an Irish women thing that we love just getting a good rummage in there, but that was something that I craved. And I remember coming home one Christmas and my parents picked me up at the airport, and I had been on, I think I'd been traveling for I don't know, we'll say 18 hours or something in total, and it was an overnight flight. I hadn't slept, probably in at least 24 hours, and you'd think that I would want to just go home and get into my childhood bed, and relax, or get some kind of Irish comfort food or whatever. But no, I remember this Christmas, the first thing I wanted to do, I literally made my parents drive me to Penny's on the way home from the airport. And I don't even know there was nothing really in particular that I needed to buy, but I was just craving this dopamine hit of, you know, the bargain hunting, I don't know, that like feeling you get when you buy something, I don't know, retail therapy. So it was kind of, you know, I went through years of this, you know, complete shopping addiction. And looking back, I don't know, like I feel like there was probably more to it. Like, you know, it wasn't just the love of clothes and, you know, makeup and jewelry and all these things that I was buying. Although I think that's what I thought it was at the time. But looking back, I think, not to get like too deep here, but I think there was like a void that I was trying to fill with all this stuff. You know, I think deep down inside I wasn't really happy in myself, and shopping, you know, was kind of masking that. Like we use a lot of other vices, you know, some people turn to alcohol or food or drugs, and shopping kind of was the thing for me back then. So getting back to my story, I did dabble with decluttering, and I love doing it, as I said, a few times a year, maybe, you know, once in the spring and once in the winter, or whenever I was like switching over my wardrobe or whatever. But then like it kind of defeated the purpose, because then I was just going back out and shopping and buying more shite that I didn't need. So I was never really addressing the problem, and I was wondering why I wasn't fulfilled. So when I was living in San Francisco, I was scrolling through Netflix one evening. My husband, I think, was on a night out with his friends or something, so I had the TV to myself, and I came across this documentary called Minimalism. I'm not sure if it's still on Netflix now. As I said, this was back in 2017, so I'm not sure if it's still, I'm sure you can watch it somewhere online. But it was basically about these two guys that had been kind of living this traditional life, you know, like they had really, you know, air quote, good jobs. They were making like good money. They lived in big houses. They drove like fancy cars. They had nice clothes. And, you know, they were just basically saying that they woke up one day and realized how unfulfilling their life was. And, you know, they realized they had these like wardrobes full of clothes, but like they were so like unhappy inside. So kind of similar to what I was probably experiencing. And then the two of them basically discovered minimalism, and they went on to kind of get rid of like the majority of their possessions, maybe like 90% of their possessions. They sold their big homes, they sold their fancy cars, they, you know, sold or donated the majority of their clothes and all of that, and then they downsized into like little small apartments, and they just made a big life change. You know, they quit their corporate jobs, and they ended up, you know, traveling around. You know, they started a podcast, they wrote books, they do like speaking gigs and things like that, and they just say now that they are like happier than ever, and they realized that all of this stuff was really holding them back from doing something that was really going to add value to their lives. So I watched that, and it's actually, it's quite an emotional documentary, like the music and everything in it. It really sort of, I don't know, it really spoke to me, and I think I actually had tears in my eyes at one point watching it. You'll know what I mean if it's your first time watching it. I've watched it several times since then, but it just really made me realize, you know, that I was nearly kind of like them. You know, I was chasing all of these material things because I thought that was what was going to make me happy. And don't get me wrong, I still do like nice things. It's not as if I'm like going and living in like a fucking yurt in the middle of the forest and like only living off the land. Like, no, like I do still like my nice things and my home comforts and all of that. But it just really made me think about my shopping habits, and, you know, how sort of dissatisfied it was leaving me feeling. Because like it's never enough, you know, you're chasing this high, and it's temporarily filled when you hand over your card and you know, buy, you know, some new clothes or whatever that thing is. But then that kind of wears off after like a few hours, or after you've worn the new outfit, or you've used the new makeup, or whatever that thing is that you've bought, that material thing, that high, it does wear off, and then you're kind of left with that emptiness again. So I would highly recommend that documentary if you haven't seen it yet. So I basically, whenever I watched that, it really did hit home, and I decided that I was going to have a proper clear out, and that I was really going to try and adopt this way of living. Now, the nice thing about those guys that I was talking about, the minimalists, they do say that it really, when it comes to minimalism, like one size does not fit all. So looking at their lives, you might think that's a bit of an extreme version of it. And it was for me. I knew that I didn't want to go to the extreme that they had went to, but they were kind of like, that's the beautiful thing about minimalism. Like, you can completely tailor it to your own life. And it's not about, getting rid of all of your possessions. It's just being very intentional about the things you're bringing into your life, and really, questioning, like, do you really need all of these possessions? Are they really bringing you fulfillment and joy, or are they just distractions and holding you back from the things that could really do that for you? So I really just totally adopted this mindset. I read all of their books, I started listening to their podcasts, and I started just doing my own research into this, and I loved it, and I started decluttering. I remember in San Francisco, we lived in a little apartment, and we had those sliding wardrobes on a track, and I remember before watching this documentary, I was in such a bad habit of, it was kind of my weekly treat, like a Friday night treat was, I would sit on the sofa, I would scroll, I would place an ASOS delivery or something like that, and I would just keep buying and buying and buying, and it got to the point where my wardrobe was so bursting at the seams that anytime I slid the door open, there would be clothes, something would fall down off a hanger or a bag or something, and it was just, every time I opened it, I was like, oh God, it was just so overwhelming. So watching this documentary really gave me this boost of motivation to finally do something about it. So I started decluttering, and I really reassessed my shopping habits, and it doesn't happen overnight, because this was kind of, trying to reprogram my way of thinking that I had, thought like this my whole life. So I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it really, gave me that awareness of what I was doing, and made me realize that if I choose to mindlessly shop and buy things that I don't really need, that's a choice, and I know that I know how that's going to end up, and it's not going to bring me lasting fulfillment. So I have been on this minimalism decluttering journey this last, whatever that is, 7-8 years, and I actually I did a workshop about it a couple of years ago, all about minimalism, and I told this story, and it's just something that I always come back to if I'm ever feeling stuck in my life, if I'm ever going through a stressful time, or if I feel like I'm, for example, lacking clarity in my business, what do I want to do in my business, or if there's something, if I'm having an issue and I just can't seem to figure out a way around it, decluttering is the one thing that I always come back to, and it's kind of a reminder to me to be like, there's something off in my life, I need to just declutter, So on that note, I wanted to just touch on how decluttering can help you manifest. So if you're into the law of attraction like I am, or even if you're not, we don't have to use the word manifest, we can use, achieving goals or whatever resonates with you. But decluttering helps with this massively. It's actually insane, right? For me anyway, oh my God. When you declutter your home, and it doesn't have to be your whole home, even if it's just a cupboard, a room, a small part of your home, it changes the vibration of your home and of you. So your energy can really shift dramatically when you start decluttering. So I always love this concept that the universe loves a vacuum. So whenever you create space in your home, it is actually creating this vacuum or this space for the universe or whatever you believe in to come and deliver something even better into your life. So decluttering literally makes space for the more meaningful things. So, you know, whether that's activities, experiences, people, you know, all these things that make us truly happy. When you think about it, a lot of them don't really have anything to do with physical objects or material things. So I think it's interesting how so many of us think. You know, I certainly thought this, you know, when I was younger growing up. I thought, oh, I'll be happy when I have, you know, a big house, a fancy car, you know, lovely clothes. Like, it was, I don't know, I think we all just have that idea that having these things is going to make you happy. And yes, like, there's no denying that they can enhance your quality of life, but I think it's when we start relying on these things to dictate our mood and our happiness that's where the problem comes. Like, it's not enough to just have those things. Like, you really need to, you know, have something more that's going to be fulfilling to you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why this is, you know, that decluttering can, you know, help us to manifest and make space for new things to come into our life. So it's all to do with the energy attached to like physical objects. So if you've ever watched Marie Kondo's show or read any of her books, you'll know that she, I'm not sure if this, I think it is like a religion, but she has like Shinto beliefs. So I think this is fascinating, and I actually want to do more research into this. But basically, it's kind of this idea that, now bear with me, I know this is a bit out there, but it's the idea that objects, like physical objects and material things and our home and all of that, they all have like a soul. They all have like energy attached to them. So when you think about it, like, there is common sense behind this as well, right? So when you think about it, like, if you have a wardrobe full of old clothes that maybe they don't fit, you know, you haven't worn them in years, and or maybe they have like bad memories attached to them, like maybe, you know, an ex-boyfriend bought you something and you thought like, oh, but that was expensive, so I have to hold on to it. But then every time you go into your wardrobe, you're seeing that, and it's reminding you of maybe like hurtful memories that you would rather forget. And the thing about it is, most of us don't ever realize that this is happening because it's on a subconscious level. So you don't need to consciously walk into your wardrobe and say, oh, that's the dress that my ex-boyfriend bought me. You know, you consciously probably won't even notice that it's there, but your subconscious registers that and it picks up on that. So having a wardrobe full of, you know, these clothes with like bad vibes, like, how do you think that's going to affect your energy? That is really going to hold you back in like every other area of your life. So imagine just how freeing that would be to get rid of those things, you know, and replace them with items that you actually love and that, you know, do fit you, that make you feel confident, that you have like positive associations with. And it's the same for things like unwanted presents. Oh my God, I know I am like, have been guilty of this over the years, of holding on to things just because someone buys it for you and you think like, oh, it would be rude to like get rid of this, you know, they've put a lot of effort into picking that or whatever, but you don't really like it, you know, that has like a negative energy associated with it. Or maybe it's a family heirloom that you feel obliged to keep. That can have negative energy too, you know, just because it was your great granny's, you know, vase or whatever that she loved. But every time you look at it, you think like, oh, it doesn't really fit, you know, my aesthetic of my home or whatever. You know, like, don't feel obliged to keep these things, you know, and you don't have to be like a bitch about it. You can get rid of things. You don't have to like, you know, broadcast it to your family that you're getting rid of things. You can do it subtly. So aside from that, I always like to ask myself, if I'm trying to decide whether or not to get rid of something, I always ask myself, is it, first of all, is it good quality? Second of all, does it tie in with my home and my style? And third of all, do I absolutely love it? And if I answer no to any one of those questions, then it is being shipped out. Like, it's not allowed a place in my home. And when I say shipped out, I don't mean like bin it. You know, a lot of stuff you could sell, you could donate, and then the stuff that's really, you know, broken or cannot be reused, that would be the only case I would actually like bin it. want to think about the environment as well. So just thinking about this, I met with a client during the week there who was moving out into a new home, and he was downsizing from his existing home, and so he kind of wanted my advice on like what he should take with him, what he should get rid of. And as soon as I walked into his living room, I noticed he had like a huge CD collection, and he had it on one of those big stands, you know, like from the 90s. And he was like, what do you think? Like, should I bring the CDs with me? And I was like, well, do you listen to them? And he was like, no, actually, I haven't listened to them in years. And I was like, why would you bring them with you then? You know, and he was like, yeah, but like, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. Like, I shouldn't just be getting rid of them. And I was like, please, you know, and I think this is a big thing for a lot of people. They feel like maybe they need that permission or someone else to come in and be like, it's okay, you can get rid of the CDs, you know, you don't need to bring that negativity with you to your new home. You know, and as soon as I said that to him, like the look of sheer relief on his face was amazing. You know, he was like, oh my God, you know, like, thank you. Like I just thought that I had to, you know, keep all of this stuff. I would have felt guilty for getting rid of them. So I think a lot of us tend to do that. So give yourself permission to get rid of things that you don't use or you don't love. So as I said, I had this kind of lifelong shopping addiction up until, you know, a couple of years ago. And the decluttering, you know, it wasn't something that came naturally to me. And if I did it, it was kind of a on-off sort of thing. It was never really consistent. So since kind of embracing this more minimalist lifestyle, I have built decluttering into my weekly routine. And now I say I built it in, I don't need to, because I am a lot more minimalist than I used to be, I don't have like a lot of stuff, you know, so I don't really need to do like a weekly declutter, but it's more, I like having that as a weekly habit that, you know, if it is a busy time, like we'll say around Christmas or holidays or something like that, you know, at least I know that this is part of my weekly routine, that if stuff does kind of creep into the house that I haven't been so intentional about, that it doesn't stay there for too long. So yeah, I do this even like an hour a week just to keep on top of things. And then the more you kind of do that, the less likely you're gonna be to buy new things. You know, you just really evaluate, because you know that, you know, I'm spending an hour every week decluttering. Like, do I really want to give myself more work to do, or do I want to take a few weeks off this? You know, so it really sort of forces you to get really intentional with your purchases. So I have been doing this consistently now. It's kind of a new habit. I've been doing it this last couple of months, and like, as I say, I don't have an awful lot of stuff, so it's really just, you know, getting really ruthless. And like, my husband and my big girl, actually the two of them, they just never know like what's gonna be gone from the house whenever they get home. They're like, Mommy, please stop throwing stuff out. And I'm like, it's gone. Like, you know, it is actually addictive when you get into it. So, but I have been doing this every week this last couple of months, and like, oh my God, the shifts that I've been seeing in my life, it's amazing. And then I don't know, is it the placebo because I am telling myself that decluttering is helping me manifest, or is it just like, I don't know. It's really interesting, and I would like to do more research into that. So let me know if that's something you are interested in learning more about. But it got to the point there last week where I had to take a week off, because I was like, stuff is happening so quickly, I cannot actually keep up with this, so I need to like take a break from the decluttering. But it just shows you how powerful it can be. So I know that everyone's tolerance for clutter is going to be different, okay? But if you think you're the kind of person that clutter, you know, doesn't affect at all, and you know, you're like, it's fine, like I like, you know, being surrounded by all these things and it brings me comfort and all this, I guarantee you, if you clear out even just one drawer or one shelf in your home, you are going to start seeing the benefits right away. It is that powerful. And you know, as I said, it's not just about getting rid of stuff, it's about becoming a more sort of conscious consumer, and, you know, not just going out and filling your home with shite again and having to constantly repeat the process. So I read a book last year, I think it was, called Make Space for Happiness, and it was fascinating. So it was all about kind of looking at the psychology behind why we shop the way we do, and it was talking about like kind of why now, like when we're on social media, it's so easy to get lured into buying all the shit that we don't need, especially on like Instagram ads, TikTok shop. You know, how many times do you get ads for something and you find yourself like going down a complete rabbit hole and you're clicking into it and you're like, oh my god, I never realized I need this. You know, I never realized like I need this whatever shower cap or whatever it is, like something completely random that you really don't need. You order it because it's quite cheap, and then it comes and it's like shit quality, or you never use it, and then you think, well, there's no point returning it, you know, because it was so cheap and whatever. So I think a lot of people get sucked up in that, and it's very easy to fall into that habit. So it's just really about becoming aware of that. So the other thing that has helped me is to get really organized and to have kind of like a place for everything in my home. And when I say I carve out that time every week for decluttering, it's like a lot of the time it's organizing that I'm doing, and it's just putting things back in their place that, you know, my daughter has maybe like messed up. So that really helps me as well. But just what I will say about that is just organization is good to a point, but I would say just beware of becoming one of these like hyper organized people who has like a container for everything and has labels and everything, because a lot of the time that, I hate to say it, but can be a mask for hiding clutter. You know, it can be another form of hoarding. And a lot of the time, rather than going out to buy all of these organizing containers, you're better off just getting rid of the stuff and having like a good purge. And then, you know, when you're really down to just the essentials, you know, then you can maybe think about organizing, but just be careful that can be a bit of a trap as well. So I'm just thinking about a talk that I did last year. It was about 6 months ago maybe. It was called The Happy Home, and it was a little bit about embracing minimalism and decluttering and things like that, and just some other tips for how, you know, you can maximize your home to really help, you know, enhance your mood and your well-being and your mental health and all of that. So whenever I was leaving, I had a wee woman. Now she was probably, I would say 80 odd. She pulled me aside and she was like, oh, I loved your talk, and, you know, got me thinking about things. But she said that she was at a point in her life where her clutter had gotten so on top of her. She said she wasn't quite a hoarder, but she just had a lot of clutter in her home, and she didn't, you know, have the energy or the motivation at her age to kind of go through and start, you know, working on it. And oh god, I really felt for her, because I think that's the case for so many people, and especially the older you get, the harder it can seem. You know, you're like, where do I even begin with this? So she was like, where do I even start with this? So the advice I gave her was to literally start with one shelf. You know, even 5 minutes, even starting with that, 5 minutes a day or even 5 minutes a week is better than nothing. And even that first little boost you're going to get from that is going to motivate you, and the likelihood is that you're probably going to do more than 5 minutes, because 5 minutes goes by so quickly. You know, you're more than likely to do maybe half an hour or maybe then an hour one day, and then before you know it, it's become a habit for you, and the feelings that you're getting from doing this are going to kind of give you that boost to keep going. The other thing I said to her was, she was surrounded by a table of friends, and I just asked them, I was like, could you, you know, go over and have like a decluttering party? Could you help her? You know, because very often we feel like we don't want to do something like this on our own, because it is such a big challenge. But if we have, you know, a group of friends or even one friend there with us, it's creating that kind of external accountability. And then there are studies to show that even just having another person in the house with you when you're doing something like this is really beneficial. They don't even have to be helping you, even just having someone there to keep you company. It's kind of this body doubling effect. So it just makes you more productive when you know that someone's there. Probably, you know, they're like watching you and you don't want to disappoint them. So those are a couple of little tips I gave her. But this is a real issue for people, and you know, it can really affect your mental health. If you have a cluttered, untidy home, you are less likely to want to invite people over, which can lead to isolation. So another little stat here for you is 77% of people with cluttered homes report avoiding social interactions due to embarrassment. So that was from Cornwall University, a study that they did. So it really is an issue for people, and I think it can be thought of as, you know, kind of like a trivial thing, like, oh, decluttering, you know, with all these TV shows and everything coming out now. But I really do think, you know, it has such a huge impact on our mood and our mental health, and it's often overlooked. I know more than anyone, it is not always easy to get rid of things, and this is honestly why I'm so passionate about learning this as a skill and, you know, kind of sharing it with others. And like, you know, I'm trying to teach my daughter to do this as well, because the earlier she learns it in life, the easier it's going to be for her. And she's not going to end up with a cluttered home when she's older and then feeling really overwhelmed. So as I said, you know, if you can make it part of your weekly routine, that's going to be amazing, and you're not going to get sucked into that trap. So I think holding on to things, I think it really kind of comes from a place of lack. Like when I look at my parents' generation, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people around that age tend to hold on to things more because maybe they didn't have a lot growing up. But I think for most of us now, that's not really the case anymore, you know, with mass-produced items, and, you know, the cost of things is so low. We have like fucking Shein and Temu and all this here, you know, there's like, we can literally have most things that we want at the click of a button and it gets delivered right to your door the next day. You know, it's the convenience of that. So I think it is easier for maybe my generation and younger generations to let go of things. So I think it's, if you're trying to maybe help a parent or a grandparent declutter, it's keeping that in mind, that they probably will be coming from a different mindset, and, you know, it may be harder for them to let go of things. So I think it's really up to us then to be the ones to break that cycle. Now, in saying all of that, like, there are times when I do find myself slipping back into old habits, and, you know, if I'm going through a stressful period, as I said before, shopping used to be this crutch that I had to help me deal with stress and to fill that void. So if there's ever a time in my life when I feel like, you know, things are getting out of my control, that is kind of my urge, is to go on my phone and like, oh, you know, I'll have a wee scroll. And buy things that I don't need. But I think it's just, you know, it's not beating yourself up, and it's having that awareness, you know, that you can see what's happening here, and you can kind of take a minute and breathe and be like, okay, like, just, you know, kind of coach yourself through it nearly. So some top tips for getting started. So if this is totally new to you, I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, but maybe it's giving you some ideas. I would definitely start by watching that minimalism documentary, and or listen to their podcasts, read some of their books to give you some motivation. Also shows like, you know, Marie Kondo, some of her shows, or The Home Edit. But just beware of shows that are too heavily focused on the organising side of things, because, as I mentioned, this can kind of lead to another form of hoarding, but it's just like organised hoarding. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, go easy on yourself, you know, don't beat yourself up. We all, you know, have to start somewhere. So start small, start with one shelf, one drawer, or one cupboard, and set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes. And even if you did that once a day or even once a week, you are still making progress. And as I said, the chances are you're going to feel motivated and you're going to want to keep doing more. So it's that idea of things in motion stay in motion. If you are feeling like you're addicted to shopping, online shopping, like I was for so many years, you could try deleting shopping apps off your phone, even for a few weeks, just to get you out of the habit of turning to that, out of comfort or out of boredom. The other thing you can do is, if you just like the act of browsing, you could window shop. So you could add things to your basket, but don't let yourself buy them for like a month, and then come back to it. And if you still really think you absolutely can't do without it, then you could buy it. And so it's just delaying that, so it's not just that instant gratification or that instant dopamine hit that you're getting. What else? The other thing I do is, I still do like to shop, okay, and I don't want to completely deprive myself of that, because I do think there is something nice that can come out of being in a physical shop and having that experience from time to time. So I do still let myself do it from time to time. Like every couple of months I will let myself, have a little browse. One of my favorite things to do is actually go to TK Maxx, and so rather than just going and buying all this random shit that I really don't need that's going to clutter up my home, I now have gotten into the habit of, if I want a treat, I'll let myself get something, but it has to be a perishable item. So what I mean by that is, I will buy myself a candle, or maybe a new journal, or a nice hand soap, so it's something that I can use up and it still feels like a little treat for myself, and I'm going to get so much use out of those things. Like I love, like smell, I love writing and journaling and things like that. So buying things that are going to be perishable rather than like little trinkets that are just going to clutter up your home. The other thing is to use up what you've got first. So you could go shopping in your own wardrobe, your bathroom cabinet, or your pantry, to see what you actually have before rushing out to buying something new. Because a lot of the time I think we forget what we already have, and we end up maybe buying duplicates of things. There's that old saying, use it up, throw it out, make it do or do without. I sound like a 1950s housewife here, I know. But it's just a nice little reminder sometimes, if you find yourself, you need like a little bit of motivation. If you have kids, rather than rushing out to buy new books all the time, you could maybe take them to the library. Like my daughter loves going to the library, and I think it's just the whole novelty of it. Or there are toy libraries popping up as well now. So rather than rushing out to always buy new toys that, they're not gonna maybe get that much use out of, you could hire toys from the toy library. Then the other thing I do with my daughter is, I try to get her into the habit, if there's something that she really wants, I say to her, yeah, like that's a great idea, add it to your birthday list or your Christmas list. And it's not to say that I don't buy her things outside of that, I do, but I try my best not to make it the norm. But I have to be honest here, this is something that I struggle with time to time, especially for some reason anytime we go on holidays and she's like begging me to go and buy her a toy or something, I do find myself slipping back into old habits. So if you've any tips for overcoming that, please let me know. And then finally, just remember that the true cost of an item isn't just what's on the price tag. So the cost, you have to think about all the other costs associated with it. So the cost it takes to store it, maybe to clean it, to repair it, to maintain it, and also the cost of the time involved in acquiring it, maybe exchanging it, returning it, reselling, or disposing of it eventually, and then just the mental energy involved in all of this. Like, is this item really worth it to you? So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you have any decluttering tips for me, especially with kids, I would really appreciate it. Please send me a message. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at emmaquinn.design, so come and say hi. And if you're interested in grabbing a copy of my book, I will leave the link down below, as well as my website and other info if you want to check any of that out. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate if you could rate, review and subscribe so others can find it, or share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. Now go out there and live your best life by design. Bye everyone.